I am excited about the new Doerr School of Sustainability in large part because I hope it will provide a platform for us all to talk about what I imagine are a diversity of perspectives on sustainability. What is it, much less how we get there? And I have thought a lot about this topic because I've had a lot of failure in the water sector trying to develop with partners sustainable solutions. So I just want to render that for you and what we have learned through interrogating that failure. One important thing I've learned is make sure you're chasing the right problem. And that's true not just in my research, but more broadly. Witness this. I know that several of you in this room have been asked by me for your best productivity management tips. Over the years, I have tried dozens of apps, platforms, websites, whatever, to help manage my research, teaching, advising, service, family obligations. And a while back, I had this fantastic project manager, and I said, hey, could you take a look, look under the hood, here's my system, let me know what would be the right tools that I should be using for this. And the whole assignment took her less than 20 minutes. And she said, none of these tools is your solution, because using the wrong tools was never your problem. Your problem is that no human being can manage the number of things you have committed to managing. Noted. Working on that, right? It's a funny example, yes, and I tried to argue with her, and she said, fine, you want tools? Here are your tools. Right? But this misdiagnosing the problem came up repeatedly early in my career, and I try to forgive myself now a little bit, because as a graduate student in public health and then environmental engineering, the problems that I was seeing as a very field-based person were compelling. They were urgent. I wanted to move and help and do something, right? At that time, we were losing 3,000 under 5 children every single day to dehydration from diarrheal disease. And tens of millions of women and girls were essentially losing their future because they spent all their free time hauling water for their families. And I think it's easy to become sort of numb to these images. We've all seen them a million times. There's actually almost something iconic, right, about the picture with a girl or woman with water on their head. So if you'll indulge me, I want to just help us feel it for a minute. The girl here in front with the white shirt, she's 10 years old. She weighs 70 pounds. The water container on her head weighs 46 pounds. That's 2/3 of her body weight. So pause for just a second and try to think of something that's 2/3 your body weight, or even half your body. Let's do easy math, it's Friday. Half your body weight, maybe your kid, or 2 mountain bikes, 70 pounds, or an electric dryer, 110 pounds, right? Now imagine carrying it around on your head for an hour. Every day, every single day. So if that's your job, this young lady is not going to play, she's not going to study, she's not going to make the kinds of investments that she needs to expand her options for her future, right? So seeing these sorts of problems and recognizing how important they were for this part of the world to actually be able to participate in that sustainable development that we're all talking about felt really urgent. I wanted to solve problems. Of course, engineering is all about solving problems, so that was a natural fit for me. And those of you who have seen engineering curriculum one way or the other will recognize something like this, right? Engineers are trained to identify problems and follow a very systematic approach to develop a solution for them. And that's fine, except for this first step, define the problem. So I was trained when I saw communities like this that the problem is clear. There's a lack of functioning infrastructure. And I knew how to work with engineers from those places, those districts, communities, to figure out how to rehabilitate stuff that had broken down or to build stuff that they needed. And it was great. It's very rewarding to see people's lives being changed in real time, and also trying to innovate in engineering and think about new technology development and new knowledge generation. But those improvements don't last, or they didn't at the time. Infrastructure wasn't maintained, so it broke down well before its useful design life. Even when it worked, many community members walked right past it and went to their traditional sources, right? And over time, I racked up more of these experiences than I would like to admit. And it's both demoralizing and a colossal waste of resources, right? It really is. And I needed to think about things in a different way. And so I spent way too long in graduate school, and also completed the program in urban studies and the technical core in sociology. And that was really important because I had to think about not infrastructure, but a service delivery system. It is a system, and that system exists within a broader context that was also important to understand. So when I think about a system in the water sector, yes, it is the infrastructure, but it's also all of the actors and institutions that have a meaningful impact on the quality of service that gets delivered ultimately, right? And from this set of failures emerged a pattern that now we've evolved into this RIA framework. It is pretty straightforward, but it's a helpful guide both to diagnose dysfunction and to think about a holistic design. Essentially, a sustainable system rests on a foundation of resources. Yep, that's infrastructure, but it's also human capital, skills, the water itself. Information, key actors in the system have to get credible, timely, relevant information that they need to play their role in the system effectively. And accountability, mechanisms that confront those actors with meaningful consequences. They could be positive or negative for their choices and behavior. You need all three of these things, right? None is sufficient on its own, as I learned in my sort of technocentric approach to solutions early in my career. So when we think about what's wrong with a service delivery system now, we use this framework to isolate, to figure out where that dysfunction sits. And we have to really think about the fact that a sustainable solution not only gets at that dysfunction, it has to actually interrogate below, and I'll come back to that in a second. But you have to be thinking about solutions that are incentive compatible. You got to get people to do what you need them to do for a long time, right? And it needs to not work against their better interests. And that part really gets overlooked. Solutions-oriented researchers want to make change. We want to make things happen. But the status quo is the status quo because someone is benefiting from it. And if you move to shift that without considering where your resistance will come from and why, you're much less likely to have a sustainable fix. So these are things that I have been learning. I'm going to give you one example, because I have very little time left. I'm going to anonymize this true case. It's from sub-Saharan Africa, and we were working on the provision of water supply in rural health clinics. And in this particular district, 1 in 5 rural health clinic did not have running water on premises, right? So our counterparts had analyzed that situation very much as I had done in my early career, and they had a perfect engineering design, but they were worried it would be expensive and wanted some revision maybe to get things a little cheaper. But I sat down with them and said, hey, let's interrogate this a little bit. Will you just humor me, and we had a little RIA session. And it always goes the same way. If you ask, well, these clinics that have broken down water systems, what happened? Oh, there's not enough money. It's always not enough money. It's always the first answer. Well, why don't they have enough money? Well, they have hardly any patients, so they're not generating a lot of revenue that they can use to keep their water system running. Well, if they don't have any patients, why did they put the clinic there? Well, because the community chose it. They choose the site where the clinic is going to be built. And I don't know if you can see it here, but these clinics, systematically, the ones that don't have water services are up in the hills, right? And the village is down in the valley. Well, if the community is choosing where to put their health clinic, why would they put it way up there? I don't want to walk up a big old hill if I'm trying to go get medical help. They chose it because the community has to donate the land where a new clinic will be built. That's their share of the cost of the clinic. That's the policy from the Ministry of Health. And if you're a community who has to choose from its land resources, hilly areas aren't good for farming. They have lower market value. So yeah, you're going to pick that to give, right? We started with an engineering problem. We ended with those civil engineers in their 70s, I was so proud of them, deciding that the right intervention here was a compensation program. So they worked with NGOs to build a fund to compensate communities who selected land that was easy to service when they were siting their new clinic, and to pay back, right, that loss of market value of land. Fantastic, amazing, right? But hard to get there in our sort of siloed sectoral perspectives. Yeah, it's a big win. That solution worked because it was tailored to that context, right? And it was tailored, it was created in deep engagement with those partners who knew that context very well. I have no idea if it's relevant for any other context. And it makes me nervous to see how quickly we move from a solution that works in one place to this idea of best practice advice. Oh, well, that was great. Where else can we do that? So rather than trying to scale any individual solution that we work on, we're interested in scaling an approach or a framework, right? So that RIA framework is scalable to virtually any context, and we've had it borrowed by colleagues in education and in energy and in health. I'm delighted, because it really just helps you ask better questions and think about how did we get here, and thus to design solutions that can help address kind of perverse incentives and dysfunction in a more systematic way. I think some of the most impactful things we've done recently is actually to partner with funding organizations and large implementing organizations who got a look at how this works and have asked us to help them overhaul the way they have organized themselves, right? How they write grant applications, how they organize their planning. And institutionalizing that mindset shift, if that's what, if that's what we are doing at the end of the day, I'm pretty happy with that as impactful. Final thoughts. It is not easy to work in this way. It takes humility. You have to walk in recognizing you're not the most expert person in the room. It absolutely demands truly interdisciplinary and team science and engagement with the communities or institutions where you're trying to see change. And it also requires time and patience. And I get that in this very urgent time, all of us want to see things happen and we want to move, and we really don't have time to wait. But I'd argue that we also don't have time to waste chasing down symptoms and the wrong problems. And instead, if we could focus and take the time we need we'll get more sustainable and effective solutions. Thank you.